In this video, we're going to take a look at variables and how they can help us in our programming, especially when we're looking at repeating something. So take a look at our task description here. We say after a button is pressed 5 times, turn an LED on. So some basic pseudocode here. Turn LED on, wait until button is pressed, add 1 to counter, repeat until 5 is reached. Then after 5 is reached, we're going to turn the LED off. So there's a number of different ways we could do this. We could simply write our code so that we say wait until button pressed 5 times in a row. Once it's pressed 5 times, then it will turn the LED off. But what if we wanted to change that from 5 times to 1,000 times? It makes the programming a little bit difficult, a lot of code in there. So the first thing I'm going to do here is create an integer or a way of inputting a variable. In this case, I'm going to use int, which represents integer. So the computer, when it's looking at this, is going to see this text, this thing I'm going to call, we'll call it count. It sees that as a value, and it's able to store a value in there and then look at that value and compare it against other conditions. So there's a couple of ways I can put this in here. I could say integer count, int count, and then I could say count equals, and we'll start off with 0 here. So I'm declaring a variable here, and then I'm assigning its value here. All right. Now that works out perfectly fine, but we can shorten this up a little bit. Remember, our programming is all about how can we do it with the least amount of code. So here I'm declaring and assigning its value in the same line. Integer count equals 0. All right. Okay, so what I want to do first is I need to turn an LED on. And that's going to be my green LED. All right. And then at this point, we want to wait until a button is pressed 5 times, and then we're going to turn the LED off. So since we're going to repeat our code here, that should automatically tell you we want to use a while loop. So I'm going to say while. And before we use this loop, we looked at sensor values like a bump switch or limit switch or sonar. This case, we're looking at a variable. So since we named our variable count, we're going to say while count. And remember, we want this condition here to be true. So as long as this condition is true, we're going to run the code below it. So I want to say while count is less than 5. Okay, while count is less than 5, remember no semicolon, open curly. I want to wait until a button is pressed. What button here? We're going to say our bump, semicolon. And then after the button is pressed, we need to change the value of count here. And how we do that is a couple of different ways here. One, we can say count equals count plus 1, and then semicolon. And again, we're really looking at seeing how can we shrink up the amount of code that we have here. So I could just say plus plus count, and that adds 1 to count. Let's say I wanted to add 2 to count. I could say plus 2 count. Okay, kind of simplifies things, makes it a little bit easier for us. All right, so let's go back over the program here. First off, we created an integer and we called it count. This is our variable, and we assigned its value. We then said, okay, turn the LED on, and while my count is less than 5, and in this case our count represents the number of button presses, we're going to wait, and we're just going to leave the LED on, so it could be on forever. I press the button once, it's going to add 1 to count. My count is now equal to 1. It goes up here, it checks to see what my condition is. My condition true still. Okay, count is still less than 1. Okay, it waits until the button is pressed again. And then eventually, once it gets around to the correct number of presses, it'll loop up here and say, while count is less than 5, count at this point will be equal to 5. It will say, okay, that's false, exit, and in this case, it'll terminate the program. In other cases, it might change and go on to another branch, another function. There's one thing I need to add in here. I need to say turn LED off. Okay, I'm going to organize here. Looks good.